Warning: this program contains strong language, auditory violence, and mental nudity. It is intended only for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. So, imagine that you wake up on any given day. Just another day that ends in Y. And shake the dust out of your eyes, and maybe you hit the restroom, maybe you see your spouse or your child, and you start to get ready for your day. And as you're taking a shower, as you're getting dressed, as you're brushing your teeth, thinking about all the things that you've got to take care of that day. You've got, this responsibility or that, or you've got to call somebody about the roof, or you've got to make a dentist appointment, or you've got to stop by the pharmacy to pick something up that you forgot the other day. All the million things that go through your mind as you get ready for your day. And imagine then that you got ready and you get in your vehicle and you're driving to work, and you've recently been recalled into the office after years of teleworking, a model that worked great for you, and you loved it, and your team loved it, and they thrived. And now you've had a recent return to office protocol that nobody really likes, but you're doing it anyway because you have to do it. And what other choice do you have? And as you sit through traffic and listen to the usual morning news, you think about, the meetings of the day and stuff that you've got to take care of. And while you're driving, you notice that your phone is just blowing up, and it's clear that someone's trying to get a hold of you, but you're trying to be good. You're trying not to look at your phone, and you don't want to be texting and driving because it's dangerous. So you make your way to work because as soon as you get there, you'll check your messages, and you pull into the parking lot of your office building. And it's first thing in the morning, and you notice right away that something is wrong. Something looks wrong, feels wrong. There's more people outside than there should be, or there's some sort of disruption to the rhythm, to the flow of the day that As you pull in, you park, and you pull up your phone, and it's friends from the office, people on your team, and everybody blowing you up because you've just received notice that your office, and every office is now faced with an imminent layoff that day. So if you've ever been in that situation, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, just imagine that that's the situation that faced nearly 2,000 Microsoft Gaming employees, including our beloved Blizzard Entertainment. So let's talk about it.
Welcome to your uncensored home for World of Warcraft news and opinions. This is Unshackled Fury.
After a year of building goodwill, Blizzard has once again kicked itself in the dick. And down the bullshit road we go once again. So welcome back for episode 141 of your uncensored home for World of Warcraft news and opinions, Unshackled Fury. I'm your host, Berserker, and with me once again is the one-man British invasion known as Mr. Jez Corden. Welcome back again, good sir.
Hey man, that was a very somber intro that you conducted there. Made me feel sad, but it's a sad week. It's ultimately incredibly appropriate. It is awful. 2,000 people laid off. It's a big news of the week in the Microsoft gaming arena, but I suppose most of the point for us is a lot of these layoffs maybe even the bulk of them, were directed at Blizzard Entertainment. And we don't have like a chart or a graph that breaks down exactly how many staff were laid off in each place and each segment within Microsoft Gaming. That also includes ZeniMax Media, who make Starfield and Fallout and Elder Scrolls, but it also includes some of the core Microsoft studios and core Microsoft operations from the gaming space. Xbox Game Studios, people like Halo Studio and stuff like that. But yeah, the vast majority of them seem to have hit Blizzard. And I suppose we're going to get into the whys this happened. But first of all, I think above anything else, if you are someone who's been impacted by these awful layoffs, brutal layoffs, probably after weeks, months of wondering what would happen to your job in a post Bobby Kotick, post Activision world, following the acquisition. My heart goes out to you, and I think I can speak for you as well.
Absolutely.
Everyone in the Blizzard fandom is feeling that pain right now. But
it's been. I think again, we keep every once in a while we find these new lows, and unless you've been living under a rock or you've been out in the wilderness somewhere. That is the big news of this past week. Is Thursday morning, a memo, an interoffice memo was sent out by Phil Spencer, who is what's his title? He's in charge of Microsoft Gaming.
The CEO of Microsoft Gaming.
CEO of Microsoft Gaming.
Chief Executive Officer of Microsoft Gaming.
So sent out a memo to folks internally, letting them know that 1,900 roles out of 22,000 were going to be let go, and that came out, sounds like approximately 7:30 a.m. West Coast time on Thursday, and it sounds like the morning sort of unfolded in such a way that people were called in or advised, and so everybody was sitting around waiting to see what was going to happen to them. And folks that have listened to this show know that I have been through a layoff in 2009 when the economy was going to shit, and I used to work at an insurance company with a homie Rommel. That's how we met. We both got laid off on the same day. He got called first, I got called second. And that feeling, those feelings, that just earth-shifting moment is unlike any that I have experienced. And seeing the folks having to go through that, I don't experience a lot of, I guess, what you would call PTSD in my life, but that is certainly one area where it pops up. Where for myself, I remember we came into the office that day and we noticed that there were a lot of extra security up by the front desk. And we just thought, well, maybe it was some sort of a training or there was something going on. And then we had one guy, I'll never forget this guy, Kevin. And Kevin, after, I don't know, it must have been like 9 o'clock in the morning, starts running around from sort of cubicle area to cubicle area going, they're doing layoffs, and he's freaking us out. And we're like, no, they're not doing that. Sure as shit, minutes later, my entire unit gets called into an office, a conference room, where our manager of however many years told us that the company was doing layoffs, that we were going to be called in individually, and now we had to go back to our desks and wait to see if we got one of those phone calls. And of course, everybody gets out, starts texting, going crazy, and like, oh shit, what am I going to do? I have a wife who's a type 1 diabetic, and let me tell you, that needs regular care and insurance. Let alone what happened to me years later, where I also need regular health benefits. And we sat and we waited. And the pit that's in your stomach, I can't describe it to you if you've never been there. But getting that phone call, watching my desk ring, and knowing that it was you, and that's that moment. And my boss called me in, and the first thing I told him, I said, "You son of a bitch, how can you do this to me?" Because I thought we were cool. I thought we were friendly. I thought that he was on my side, and business is business. And And that is always going to be true, especially when you have stakeholders and shareholders, more specifically.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget going back to my desk, boxing my stuff up, and driving home and talking to my wife saying, I don't know what we're going to do. We didn't have my child, thankfully, at that point, and we didn't have a mortgage yet either, thankfully. But that feeling of not knowing what you were going to be doing and how you were going to make ends meet, and how there was no preparation for this. It was instantaneous. It is awful, gut-wrenching, heart-rending stuff. And I was fortunate enough where after a year of being unemployed, because that's how long it took me to find a job again, I ended up in a career field that I'm in now, and it's all worked out for the best. But that's not the road for a lot of folks. And so to see that happen, to watch that unfold Thursday morning, it brought back a lot of feelings. And I was texting Rommel about it, and you know, we both remember those times well. And to watch that happen so close to our sort of digital home was just awful on a personal level. So to echo your comment, anyone who's affected hears this, my heart goes out to you as well, because it is unmooring in a way that you just don't know unless you've been there. And then to watch, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like it's kind of compounded as well, because I'm British, right? So and when you say things like it was instantaneous, and then you talk about the medication and stuff like that, Europeans don't generally have to deal with anything like that, because there's a consultation period by law. They can't just lay people off straight away. There has to be like this sort of holding period where they have to keep paying you for a certain amount of time. And also the government has to be informed, and also national healthcare don't have to worry about diabetes meds and stuff like that. And so it's this sort of extra layer of fear that I don't think a lot of Europeans appreciate when it comes to laughs. And I've seen some really heartless comments like, "Oh, it's no big deal, it's no big deal," and they just don't know what it's like in America when it comes to this stuff.
It's rugged.
I certainly didn't know. It's like something I've learned in the job, working with Americans and stuff like that. So it's absolutely brutal. Brutal.
Yeah, it's pretty cutthroat in that way. And so to see that happen with our folks, not really knowing how that was going to unfold, because now we're you and I being stepbrothers now, we're part of this larger family, this Microsoft family. And what does that look like? That 1900, that whatever, there's a percentage of that here. What is that? 8%, 11%. Who's that going to be? What does that look like? We don't know. And I think right off the top, the first thing that caught my eye out of the Blizzard camp was that the survival game that you and I have talked about before, and that was long teased, and we thought maybe this BlizzCon we'd see it or whatever else. It looks like that entire team got let go, and the game has been canceled outright.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they it's weird because Matt Booty is and Blizzard fans always smirk at this. I'm used to this by now, having covered Microsoft for how long I did. But Matt Booty is in charge of all Microsoft gaming operations. So Phil Spencer oversees the whole business aspect of it, but Matt Booty is in charge of all the gaming studios, and all the each gaming studios answers through to him, each gaming department, so to speak. And he said in his email that the survival game team have been, or at least part of the survival game team have been offered other positions, but it just doesn't seem to be true. There doesn't seem to be any. No, I haven't seen any. I haven't seen a single person from survival game team sort of hint at the fact that they survived the cull. And that doesn't mean there hasn't been. Like I say, we don't have a full granular breakdown of each studio that was impacted, and to what extent. All we have really that we can go on is I don't know what you call it, the sort of anecdotal evidence that we see on Twitter and LinkedIn, and the volume of comments and questions, and then the analysis that some other people have done and stuff like that. But it does seem that the lion's share of the layoffs were within Blizzard and its various teams. You got Team 1, 2, 3, 4 and stuff like that. And also you've got like ZeniMax also caught a bunch of layoffs with this whole cycle. So Microsoft acquired ZeniMax a few years ago for, I think it was $7.8 billion off the top of my head. And they've lost a lot of administrative staff and publishing staff and stuff like this in this sort of way. But Blizzard lost a lot of devs, but also like they shut down the entire community service team. So expect your game masters in World of Warcraft to be significantly worse because they are outsourcing all of that to, I've heard, Egypt and some other countries, which not to denigrate the people there, just doing a job, but they've been employed because they can be paid less, so they're being exploited basically.
Yeah.
And the Microsoft's going to automate the rest. So like I've already seen people on Reddit, on the Warcraft Reddit, say, was this GM response generated by artificial intelligence? Very simplistic, very there was back in the day, like Blizzard GMs were like unique amongst gaming sort of customer service. Like they were fun. They were part of the game's identity.
They were very much so.
Yeah, they were.
Seeing one in game was like a highlight. Like, oh shit, there's a GM in game. Like, that's cool. And they were fun
the
to
GM Island thing and stuff like that back in the day.
Yes.
So it's been crazy, like watching this all unfold, and a huge part of it is, Blizzard, Activision, Blizzard staff with a large amount of community managers will let go. Huge amount of community managers let go. Microsoft shut down the teams at Activision and ZeniMax responsible for publishing physical discs and getting games into retail. So expect retail offerings to be potentially worse as well down the line, because Microsoft's going to do all that in-house now, with less people than there were before. So don't know what that's going to look like. But, they're not just doing this for the sake of doing this. There are real, financial reasons why they've done this, and we can get more deeply into the analysis of that in a minute. But it's of no comfort. This is also, it's not isolated to Microsoft. There's been a huge amount of layoffs across the whole industry. Yeah. Unity's laid a ton of people off. I saw Business Insider, the media laying off 8% of its workforce. Riot laid off a ton of devs too.
Yes.
Some Riot projects I've been told have been cancelled as well, stuff that hasn't been announced. So, there's, and then obviously Embracer Group, they make games like Darksiders. Well, loads of games these days. They own Crystal Dynamics. They own Tomb Raider. They own IDOS. So they own Deus Ex. Like they own a ton of games. They're laying off and shutting down studios left, right, and center. Studio that make Gothic's been shut down. It's crazy. It's a bloodbath out there, and it's probably only gonna get worse. As and there's a variety of reasons for that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's something that we've seen, like any of us that are around, right? We play games or we're interested in sort of how the sausage is made, which it's so different. Growing up, I don't know who made Mega Man 2. I don't know who made Legend of Zelda. Like, I just played this stuff and it was fun, and we never really knew who was behind, who were the humans behind any of this. We didn't really know. And so we're so much more invested and engaged in the lives and the well-being of the human being, the individuals who are responsible for all of these great activities that we get to enjoy, these great games that we get to enjoy. And as we've watched these other ones happen, you mentioned Riot, right? That was a huge one that happened. And, you kind of wonder, well, Blizzard 2018 had a big layoff and a whole bunch of trouble there. And that's when this show started watching the financials more closely. I became a Blizzard shareholder at that point because I wanted to get the meeting materials and all the other stuff so I could watch it and see how that stuff happened. And now to see that once again, Blizzard's not special in this way. And granted, it's part of Microsoft now, so it's going to have to do whatever Microsoft does. But we always felt like Blizzard was kind of a part that it was better than, or it had some insulation in a way that it's not true. It just does not exist. And so if you, like I, had any illusions that somehow they were going to be different, this pretty much shatters whatever is left of that. And so looking at, to kind of break it down a little bit, and maybe to start back with the survival game, when we go back a little bit, Blizzard had the Titan, Project Titan, that got canceled, and eventually it turned into Overwatch. And there's a story about that people know, and it's a shame. I would have loved, and I think a lot of us would have loved to have actually seen what Titan looked like, just, I don't know, for shits and giggles, just to see it. But with Project Odyssey, with this recent survival game that got canceled, you have talked about how you got to see it. You had hands-on at one point. You even described sort of what that looked like. And so for those of us on the outside, it very much felt like there was progress, that things were coming along. I was a little worried when Samwise Didier retired, because I thought he was part of that team. And so that kind of did put a little in my brain. But everything that we'd heard was it was coming along, and it's this and that, and there were no signs of trouble. Now, since then, it does sound like, because you had mentioned the engine that this had run on, it does sound like that may have been a sticking point or was part of the problem. But can you maybe shed a little light on why maybe this game was canceled, and, to, as harsh as this sounds, to put feelings aside in this matter, was that maybe the right call or not?
Well, just to clarify, like what I saw, and I never actually played it myself, but I was shown, pre-alpha footage essentially,
right.
And what I saw was like part of an internal presentation, I think, where they actually showed it off to some Blizzard staff, and internally in California, and they it looked great. Like it looked like it looked like it was on the Overwatch engine. It had that sort of Pixar-ish art style, and it was from a first-person perspective, and the character had a bow and arrow. I immediately thought of Hanzo from Overwatch, and in my head it was like, oh, okay, so they're building this on the Overwatch engine or something. And then it had this great fairy tale aesthetic. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like Pixar Fable, or maybe even like the Pixar movie Rapunzel. I don't know if you've seen that. But
yes, of course.
Yeah, it really did give me that sort of. It's not Warcraft style, because it leaning really hard into the sort of fairy tale aspect rather than like Warcraft sort of mashup of genres. Like Warcraft is almost steampunk at times. It's weird.
Yeah.
But with the goblin stuff and but this was like pure fantasy fairy tale, and it kind of looked to me like I saw sort of hints of the building mechanics, and it really did remind me of Fallout 76. I don't know, people might freak out at that comparison, but Fallout 76 has evolved into a very popular game with a very passionate fan base. And I saw base building with something that to me looked like a player-made potion shop, for example. And according to Bloomberg, who had an expose on what was going on, what went wrong with the game potentially, they were saying that they were trying to build the game for mobile. So it sounded to me like they were trying to make this sort of Genshin Impact-like engine that would run across devices, So like Genshin Impact is built on Unity, and Unity is kind of known for its, cross-platform compatibility.
Okay.
So like the same client for Genshin Impact runs across PC, runs across mobile devices, Android, iOS, all with the same sort of, underlying technology. So I think like they were trying to do the same for this, but it's not easy to do that kind of stuff, it's really not, which is why that's why Unity's so popular, it's because it's one of the few engines out there that can do that kind of cross-platform stuff. And if like a company as big as, Genshin Impact's Hoyoverse company is using Unity, that's for a reason, you know. It's because there's just not a lot of alternatives out there. So it sounds to me like Blizzard was trying to develop its own version of this internally rather than defer to something like Unreal Engine or defer to something like Unity. And apparently they had these ambitions of 100 players in a single server, a single map. And you gotta remember, I don't know if Unity is particularly great for that either. So you gotta remember, Genshin Impact, like, it's not truly an MMO. In fact, it's barely even an MMO at all. It's got co-op features. You can join another person's world and do like limited co-op with them, but it's not like a continuous open world in the same sense that World of Warcraft is, you know. Again, World of Warcraft's kind of unique in that context as well. And it really did sound like they were trying to do that sort of. They were just biting off more they could chew, and it was like this really ambitious project, and it had been in development for 6 years, and then they reckoned it was still another 3 years away from maturity. And in that sort of 3 years, in 6 years of development time, and then another 3 years on top of that, that's like hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of just labor costs and all that kind of stuff. It's an astronomical amount of money that could have potentially, you know, been spent on Warcraft expansions. It could have potentially been spent on, you know, Overwatch content or some, like one of their quote unquote more successful games, you know. And in this business, you have to take risks. If you want to make the next big thing, you kind of have to take risks. But there's a game recently that came out that kind of flies in the face of that argument, and that's Pal World, which is developed by 15 people on a budget of reportedly around $8 million, and it's sold 8 million copies in a week. It's blown up, and it's completely, and it's Project Odyssey's wheelhouse. It's a survival game, you know. So it's like, would there have even been a market for Odyssey when it came out? I really think like they should have released that game in early access. Can you name for me a single survival game that was released feature complete? They're all early access. Every single one, almost every single one is early access. Grounded was early access. And, you know, Enshrouded's in early access now, I think, off the top of my head. V Rising's in early access. Ark Survival Evolved was early access. And Conan Exiles was early access. They were all early access. So I don't understand why Blizzard was like, we're gonna just develop this, you know, and make it feature complete first, and then try and retroactively compete with these games that have had market penetration already with their early access periods and stuff. So it just sounded like an easy. They decided for whatever reason there had to be cuts, and we'll get into the reasons in a minute. It sounded like that was just almost like a no-brainer situation. It was like, if we're gonna make cuts, it has to be here, because this is the, you know, the sort of the situation this game is in. This is how much it's going to cost to actually finish it off, and this is like, you know, how much we can save by doing this, and how much like we can reprioritize resources in games that are making money today, and that is Warcraft, that is Overwatch, that is Diablo, you know, and other stuff. And you know, Microsoft did say in their emails they've got other promising unannounced projects that some developers will be shifted to as well. A lot of rumors that could be StarCraft related, because, you know, Phil Spencer was talking about StarCraft at BlizzCon. I don't know if Phil will be welcome at BlizzCon ever again after this week, but, you know, he did talk about StarCraft, and you know,
you even called into question whether or not we'll even have another BlizzCon.
Yeah, I did. I mean, that's another way you could make savings, because I was told this year that BlizzCon had cost them like millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and I remember people were complaining about how much the tickets cost and how much the hotels were, and, you know, because Blizzard earmarks all those hotels as well, so they have to pay the hotel chains. It doesn't make any money. It's like a huge drain on resources as well. And it's never made money. That show has never made money. But, you know, it depends on your perspective. And like from Blizzard's perspective, and probably Activision Blizzard's perspective, it was like that's part of the marketing spend. That is like about building fandom and curating fandom and all this kind of stuff.
Getting the hype going. I don't know if Microsoft has that same mentality, because Microsoft's a very cold company. They are sort of notorious for not being able to read what consumers want. They're notorious for struggling to connect with fans and customers and being unable to read the room. They are notorious for this. So like when I think about what, as someone who's, you know, long experienced what Microsoft does and how they operate, BlizzCon is something that I would expect them to cut. So, and you know, it'd be devastating because I've never got the opportunity to go to BlizzCon. It's always been a dream of mine to go, but I would rather people have jobs than that we have BlizzCon, you know. But even then, it's like if they cut BlizzCon, there are probably people whose job it is to run BlizzCon, so that's going to probably be job cuts as well. So, oh god, it's a whole mess, man. It's a whole ass mess, and I think that's part of the reaction from, at least from us as players, is going into this, because you and I talked about this a bunch of times. Going into this situation with the sale, it was like, here we go, Microsoft, White Knight riding in. They're gonna throw Bobby Kotick down a well, and you know, we're gonna save the company, and everything's gonna be great. And you know, we talked about how small the portfolio portion at Activision Blizzard would represent out of the Microsoft. I mean, on top of all of this, and as has been noted, they closed the day, that Thursday, Microsoft did, at a valuation of over $3 trillion. So it's a big ass company. It's worth a lot of fucking money. So we did not think that anything like this, I'm sure collectively, if you'd asked anybody Wednesday night, hey, do you think that Microsoft is going to lay off nearly 2,000 people and cancel a Blizzard game and lay off a bunch of other folks? And no, you're crazy. No, that's Microsoft. They would never do that. So to see this happen, it's not even like a cold slap of reality. It's like a Mike Tyson punch to the solar plexus. Like it's out of nowhere, and it's fast and it's hard, and you just like, what the fuck just happened? So
yeah, it's crazy.
That to us is new. Like the Microsoft experience, you know, as you talked about, you know, seeing how they navigate this landscape and the perspective that they have, and maybe a misguided one at times, like that's not something that we have experienced yet before. And so this is certainly our first dose of that reality coming in, and to have something that people were looking forward to, even if we didn't really quite know what it was, like that's a challenge. And again, just to rewind a little bit for our listeners and for folks that may not know, can you briefly describe a little bit what something like Unity, when you say an engine like Unity or Unreal Engine or one of these other ones, can you just in layman's terms describe what that is, what those are?
Yeah, so like Unity is like Unity and Unreal Engine, for examples. They're like the underlying software that you build your game in. So it's like, you know, taking Unity as an example, it's like a whole user interface, and this is like where you build your worlds, and this is how you set up your game logic and all this kind of stuff, and then, you know, when it's done, you compile it and export it as a game, and then you log into Microsoft or PlayStation or Google's website, and where you can upload a game and get it approved by them for publishing and stuff like that. Blizzard has always made its own engines, you know, and they've been very, very successful at it. One of the reasons World of Warcraft is unfucking touchable is the engine. Like when you've played World of Warcraft, every other MMO feels sluggish, unresponsive, and all this other stuff. And it's because of Warcraft's engine. It's like, it's really hard to emulate that. I remember when I've like, World of Warcraft was my first real MMO. I played Final Fantasy 11 a little bit as a Final Fantasy fan, but I didn't get it. And also, it was brutally difficult and, frankly, depressing to play Final Fantasy 11. Like, it's like when you died in that game, you lost experience points. You could level down, and it was brutally tough. You had to level in groups. Finding a group was painful if you were anything other than a healer. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare game. So I was really looking forward to World of Warcraft as a Warcraft 3 player. And I was just kind of like, this is going to be much better. And I read the previews and stuff, and I was like, sounds like it's fixing everything that I hated about Final Fantasy 11. You can play by yourself, it's got all this other stuff, I remember being excited about the fact you could sit in chairs and go to an inn, Goldshire Inn, not on Moonglade though, but yeah, it's like that's proprietary to Blizzard. It's Blizzard's engine, right? And that's why when I played Star Wars: The Old Republic, I was like, why doesn't this feel like wow? Why is it so sluggish? And I didn't really understand engines at the time, like And then I played like Elder Scrolls Online again. It's like sluggish and janky and horrible feeling compared to WoW. Even Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn, which is like the only credible competitor to World of Warcraft in the subscription MMO space, even that just doesn't feel as responsive and sort of tactile as WoW does. And it's because of the proprietary tech that Blizzard has developed over decades to make WoW what it is. It's super responsive while also being massively scalable and relatively easy to rapidly build content for. So in their mind, and also this is the real kicker, Unity costs money, Unreal Engine costs money, and they take a cut. That's their business model, right? They're like, you can use Unity, but you have to pay us this, you have to pay us that, right? There was this big uproar over the summer because Unity was like, they were going to increase their fees for developers because they're having money problems as well, like every other company.
Yeah.
Like, we need to find money from somewhere. The only way we can do this is we're going to charge for every single installation of a game, rather than the flat fee, and everyone was like, oh, well, what about privacy? What about hostile, fake installations to hurt the dev and all this kind of stuff? There's this really bad communication, and it ended up with the Unity CEO, resigning, and it was this whole ass mess. So
yeah,
it's difficult to deal with an engine when it's not yours. So like there is a logic there where it's like we should develop our own engine in-house and then we have full control over everything to do with it. So I can see why Blizzard would have done that, because every single game they have, pretty much, as far as I know, is its own engine, except for Diablo Immortal, I think. I got a feeling Diablo Immortal might even be on Unity, so I'm just going to check that while we talk. But that's the mentality for developing your own engine. But like I say, it's really, really hard. Like Halo Infinite, which was developed by Microsoft and 343, was notoriously had issues with getting content, and still is. Like, it gets content patches way slower than Overwatch does, gets content patches way slower than other shooters do. And the big thing that's often blamed is the proprietary engine they built for it. Like, and because it's proprietary, you have to, if you're hiring a new developer, you have to train them on it, which is slow. But like, if it's something that's known, like Unity or Unreal Engine, then it's like, oh, I can instantly hire an Unreal Engine developer, and boom, they're ready to go. I don't have to train them on everything. And yeah, like Unreal and Unity, like studios will have in-house tools for these things, but it's nowhere near as complicated potentially as training them on a proprietary engine. So that was blamed for Odyssey having this sort of really long and expensive dev cycle. They were developing the engine alongside developing the game and trying to do too many things at once with it. And I think in the Bloomberg article, they're actually talking about, should we switch out from Unreal Engine, because at least then it's a known quantity and we can get people online. But even that has issues, because Unreal Engine, not particularly great at doing open world, and it's not particularly great at doing other stuff, like or at least it wasn't historically. I think it's gotten better, but there's like only Fortnite really, which sort of fully showcases what Unreal's capable of doing. And then that's because Fortnite, the developers, also own the engine, so they know that engine inside out and upside down and backwards. So switching your whole engine over to, another code base and stuff is also not really an option. It just got into this sort of no-go situation, I guess. So I've just looked it up. So Diablo Immortal actually uses a proprietary engine built by NetEase. So like again,
I remember the NetEase connection.
Yeah, apparently that's coming back too. I don't know if we talked about it, but rumor is that Blizzard, well, I suppose Microsoft has patched up their relationship with NetEase after Kotick reportedly created it. So might see World of Warcraft come back to China as well, which Microsoft would like very much for money. And hopefully Chinese gamers, will like that too.
Yeah.
It might mean a lot of them have to start over again, because I don't know if the server information will be there, but that's a whole other kettle of fish to discuss. But yeah, Odyssey, it just seems like that was an easy pick for culling, and they swung the axe.
Well, just to sort of cap the engine mention, is because I don't know that you and I will ever be able to do an episode where Cyberpunk is not mentioned. Cyberpunk was built on an internal engine, Red Engine, and that notorious for having different issues with that. And it sounds like for Project Orion, which is the sequel, that they're switching over to Unreal Engine, if I recall.
Yeah, that's right.
And part of that is exactly what you mentioned, is training and cross-training, because it's a lot faster to recruit people that already know how to work on that than it is to train them on this brand new thing that they're kind of building as the train is going down the tracks. So it sounds like it's kind of universal across the board with these development companies.
It's a hire and fire thing too, right? Because like if you are working with contractors, it's like training them on the engine and then laying them off. That's like a huge waste of resources. But if they already know the engine because it's something everybody uses, or is at least more familiar out there, like when people are learning to game dev, typically they start with Unity and then maybe they go to Unreal Engine, because that's the one everyone uses, like Microsoft doesn't offer Slipspace, the Halo engine for people to just play around with. You have to be an employee to get access to that information. It's proprietary information, right? So yeah, it's pros and cons, right? But it's one of the things that makes Blizzard games so expensive, is because they do a lot of in-house stuff, which requires more engineers potentially than you would if you were using something like Unreal Engine. But it sounds like the culture might change. I wouldn't be surprised if we see. I believe in my heart of hearts that, and I don't have any information on this. So don't take this as a leak or something. But I believe in my heart of hearts that we are going to get a StarCraft shooter, third-person StarCraft shooter. I believe that in my heart. I don't know what. Maybe I'm partially just manifesting it. The StarCraft ghost.
Oh, I'm right there. I'm with you. Every time you talk about this, I start to get excited.
Yeah, I honestly believe that we'll make a StarCraft shooter of some capacity, and I think it'll be built in Unreal Engine. There's a great example of a third-person shooter with monsters and stuff that feels heavy, and that's Gears of War. So Gears of War with StarCraft stuff in it. That's all I want out of life, really.
Play that all day.
That's it, yeah.
That would make a great bridge between Cyberpunk 2077 and Orion. get my fill on that kind of play. So we have the survival game, whatever it was going to be called, that's out. All those folks, sounds like they're out. Maybe there's a handful that got transferred somewhere, but like you said, all we're seeing is whatever's reported on social media, people kind of reporting, I'm in, I'm out, whatever the deal is. The other, at Blizzard anyway, the other sort of franchises that I think we've seen hit were Overwatch 2 and Diablo. I saw a lot of artists being let go or other people being let go. Relative to those two franchises in particular, is this because they're not performing as well? Is this because the main development is over with? Is there some redundancy with these that people just don't seem to be aware of? What are you getting out of, I don't know, what are you seeing out of that points to why these franchises got hit?
I'm like, some of it is like, I think using Overwatch as an example, I've got a feeling that some of the teams that are responsible for PvE content will probably let go. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's because, they had a team that was developing PvE content for the PvE mode, and then they were, the story mode stuff was cancelled, and then they were like, okay, well, instead of doing the story mode, what we're going to do is we're going to do these PvE missions and stuff like that. And I actually played a couple. They're pretty fun. But it's at the same time, it's like, well, when I open up Overwatch, I'm probably not going to be playing the story mode. I'm probably going to be playing the multiplayer, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the team that was dedicated to building Overwatch PvE content, maybe that was an aspect of Overwatch that was downsized. So they can shift resources over to the stuff that is working, which is the PvP content. I know Overwatch is one of, if not the most negatively reviewed game on Steam, and some of that's backlash against microtransactions.
I was going to say, why is that? Is it just that bad? I don't really play it that much.
Yeah, it's not that. It's like it was backlash. It's backlash against microtransactions and Blizzard in general. It's backlash against the PvE mode being cancelled, and it's also backlash from Chinese players who lost access to Blizzard games from the NetEase partnership. So they use the Steam reviews to vent their frustration, and it became this meme where it's like, give Overwatch a negative review, right? Yeah. But despite that, it's still one of Blizzard's best performing games. There was a LinkedIn, someone updated their LinkedIn with like achievements they'd done, and they were like, yeah, Overwatch made $250 million profit last year.
Jesus.
So it's doing well. There's nothing to there's nothing to deny about, right? So there's that aspect of it, and I think like just the bits of Overwatch that weren't working, the layoffs, fell there. I'm not sure I saw a lot of layoffs in the Diablo camp.
I saw a few. And I was surprised considering that it's still relatively new and it's still putting shit out, but I saw at least a handful of folks. Seemed to be mostly in the artist area.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think like there's this sort of contention about Microsoft's corporate culture, and that's like revolves around using contractors instead of full-time staff. So like I think maybe from Microsoft's perspective is like, once the game's out, your artists probably aren't arting a lot when there's not an immediate thing to be working on. And it really sucks, because one of the things that is so iconic and so good always about Blizzard games is the art. Like, I remember in Shadowlands, which was ill-received by the community, shall we say.
Putting it lightly.
Putting it lightly. Everyone always said, yes, Shadowlands is bad, but the art is great. The environment is still really good. Same with Battle for Azeroth. People didn't like grinding Azerite, but they still loved the art. The environment art was still on point. Some of those zones, Justvar and
unbelievable.
Unbelievable, absolutely amazing. Like some of the best environments I've ever seen in the game. And I know the engine is old as hell, but the art style is timeless, and the art direction for Battle for Azeroth was absolutely spectacular. And Dragon Knowledge has been no different. It's been absolutely spectacular. The Emerald Dream is absolutely gorgeous zone, absolutely stunning zone. But when it comes to Diablo, I'm not sure, because I know that Microsoft is really bullish on Diablo and its future. I just wonder if like it's just not hitting some kind of target, and probably part of that is the live service. I mean, season 1 of Diablo was awful. Season 2 seemed to pull it back a bit, but it still had problems. But I don't know if you've been watching the drama at all.
Yes.
But season 3's season 3's gone a step backwards again, and they added a bunch of stuff that everyone hates in action RPGs, which is gates, barriers, and traps, which no one likes, having to wait for traps to go away before you can move. These games are always about moving and killing stuff quickly, and if there's just some spikes that come up and you have to just wait for them to go away like an automatic door. It's just not fun. I don't know who in their right mind would have thought, oh yeah, let's put some traps in here, this would be a great idea. It's like, bro, what are you doing? Path of Exile literally tried this and everyone hated it. Luckily, they responded very quickly and nerfed it already. But I think like the ongoing issues of the live service is probably why Microsoft was like, we need to scale this back a bit and hopefully we can grow it and come back later. And I say come back later because, dude, one of the things, like, as someone who's been following Blizzard for a while, you'll probably remember other rounds of layoffs that have happened over the years with Blizzard. I think there was some in 2016, there's some in 2018. And despite this, Blizzard grew to its biggest headcount ever during the pandemic. So like over like 2020 to 2022, they almost doubled in headcount. So even though they'd done all those massive layoffs before before the pandemic, they went back in the other direction and basically hired them all back, over time. And I remember seeing people on Twitter being like, "Oh, I was laid off, but now I'm back," because it's like, "Oh, we actually needed these people,"
Yep.
And it's like, and again, this is like, it borders on a wider discussion about the way the American economy is and the way the American corporate culture operates. But it's, they call it hire and fire for a reason. It's like, you fire people to make your quarterlies look good, and Microsoft share price went hard up when they announced these layoffs. And then when you actually double back around and start building your new projects and stuff, you kind of start realizing, actually, maybe we do need some more community managers, or actually maybe we do need an artist that really understands Diablo, or maybe we do need this person. And then they start hiring them back gradually over time. And you can't do that in Europe to the same sort of degree, but there are roles that just aren't going to get hired back. And that's like in publishing, because Microsoft has its in-house publishing team, in retail liaisons, because Microsoft has its own in-house retail stuff, customer service. Microsoft doesn't believe in customer service. If you've ever purchased anything from a Microsoft store and had an issue with it, sure as hell that Microsoft does not believe in customer service.
Yeah.
So yeah, those departments are probably never coming back. But yeah, I think we could see a lot of the people who got, or at least some of them who got laid off, mysteriously get their jobs back in the coming months. But if they would even want to work at Microsoft again after this, I don't know. But there's not a lot of jobs out there right now.
Yeah, it's, as we've talked about, it's industry-wide, right? In gaming and tech, it's happening all over the place. And, here in California, I don't live that far from Silicon Valley, and the stuff you see, even just semi-locally, the boom and bust cycles of a lot of these businesses, it is staggering to watch, depending on especially the budgets and the amount of millions of dollars that are involved that just seem to flow around. It's insane. And so I guess to get, we're almost an hour in here, and we haven't yet even talked about our favorite franchise, the whole reason this show exists in the first place, World of Warcraft. For the most part, from what I've seen, has been mostly untouched. The only exceptions that I've seen so far is I have seen a couple community managers in Europe, Varaya being one of them, one that is near and dear to my heart, the one that consoled me after watching the Anduin cinematic at BlizzCon, and it appears that her position was affected. And as you said, and as she seems to have suggested along with others, the process is different in Europe. And so, maybe there's something else that might happen, might get transitioned, or, maybe there's a longer runway there, which, is way better than I think what people get here. But overall, it seems like World of Warcraft has fared pretty well. I haven't seen a single dev that I follow or am aware of mention that they were let go. We talked last time about the roadmap, and I had asked the question even like, is it dangerous to put out some of these things, specifically like an alpha, because you never know what'll happen? And to that end, Holly Longdale did put a post out on Twitter that said, because some have asked, our roadmap and plans for classic and modern World of Warcraft aren't changing. This team is here for our players and each other, even in grief. I love them and you all. So great. She's, having met her in person, I assure you folks, she is the genuine article. She's very nice.
She seems really cool.
She's legit. So we seem to be okay somehow.
Yeah, Warcraft did avoid the bulk of this stuff, and part of it is because Warcraft still just makes so much money. You know, it's the cash cow. It's the one that makes money. It's the envy of the gaming world. World of Warcraft is.
How much? Like, could you put a dollar amount on it?
No, I can't. But I just know from talking to people that it's like it's the envy of the gaming world. Even though it's been in decline and stuff, you've got a game that gives guaranteed cash flow. You know, there's no risk here. You've got a dedicated player base who will never quit. I've got like years of player time accumulated, and you know, I always buy the 12-month every single year. It's like
Me too.
It's like a Patreon for a game. You know, World of Warcraft. Kind of just. It's the guaranteed cash flow, quarter over quarter. You don't want to jeopardize that. And that's why like Microsoft does things like Xbox Game Pass or Xbox Live Gold. It's guaranteed income, you know, because people don't unsubscribe as long as the game's good, as long as the service is good. And Blizzard, World of Warcraft has improved a lot in recent years. And I do think, like, I think we talked about before, like, I do think the onboarding process for new players needs to be a lot better. But I think that's what things like Season of Discovery is for. You know, Season of Discovery is, you know, very accessible, and it's very popular on streaming services, and, you know, that sort of makes people curious. I get messages all the time, you know, from Xbox fans, like, saying, I really want this to come to Xbox because I want to try it for the first time, and they always hint about bringing it to consoles, and I do think it will come to consoles, which, again, will give it a whole new audience. But yeah, it does seem like Warcraft's completely avoided the bulk of these cuts, and as a Warcraft fan, I'm really happy about that. But at the same time, it's bittersweet, you know, because all this other stuff happened to all the other teams and all the other studios, and yeah, I don't know. What a awful. It's really weird how the industry is right now. There's like, last year was so many high quality releases. We had like the Cyberpunk expansion, which was really well received, and it felt like every month there was at least 2 or 3 9 to 10 out of 10 games that were launched last year, because the pandemic sort of crush had ended, and then everyone was suddenly back in the office, and all these games that were in development progressing slowly all of a sudden became like turbocharged, and you know, we got to a point where there was just tons and tons of great games coming out, and it's still continuing even now. We've had loads of good games come out in January, even now, but it's like in the background there's all these layoffs, tons and tons of layoffs. It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
So has somebody with his hand on the pulse, and I mean, this is your day job, is reporting on these issues. Why? From a 30,000 foot view, why is this happening right now? Why is it that it seems like now, within the last, I don't know, year maybe, you know, you can correct me on this, but it seems like in more recent times anyway, that more of this has been happening, that there are more devs that are out of jobs than we've ever seen in such a period of time. Is there like a major contributing factor to this? Is just the perfect storm? Like, what is it?
So I read a really, really long analysis recently about the state of the gaming industry and what it means, and I can, you know, drop your link and you could stick in the description when the podcast goes live if people want to check it out in detail. But essentially the short answer is it's a combination of things. So like I mentioned, Activision's headcount ballooned during COVID. And I think part of this was there was this widespread belief that COVID and lockdown would create a wave of new gamers. It would create, people who are like, maybe they're playing Diablo Immortal for the first time, or Hearthstone, or Warcraft or something, trying out the hobby for the first time, and
because we're stuck at home.
Because we're stuck at home, or we're stuck at home, or we don't have to commute anymore, so we've got more money to spend on things like games, and we've got a little bit more time. Presuming we're not slacking off when we're working from home, we at least don't have to commute anymore. So that will add another couple of hours a day to gaming time potentially, and the expectation there was. So kids not at school. So the expectation there was it would create a wave of new gamers, and those gamers would be sticky, and they would not stop gaming after the pandemic ended, and everything would be hunky dory, and the industry would grow overall. However, that didn't happen. There was a boost to start with. And we saw lots of games hit the most concurrent users ever, and like I know working at a website, seeing our traffic stats, our traffic was absolutely insane during the first couple of lockdowns. So everyone's stuck at home on their phones, more than ever, browsing, reading about gaming news, and and our company and our various tech website brands, we had a boom time. Everyone was stuck at home. They were like researching, what's the best PC for a home office, what's the best webcam for Microsoft Teams, and all this kind of stuff. So there was this big boom time for everyone who was in tech. So everyone in tech was like, okay, we need to take advantage of this right now. Right now, we need to take advantage of this. Let's hire as many people as we can, put as much product as we can out there, and take advantage of the fact that no one can go to work, no one can go to school. And it does seem like Activision Blizzard was particularly riding this wave. If you look at the reported headcount, which is going around, which I don't know 100% is accurate, but I have been told that they did definitely balloon headcount way beyond what was perhaps responsible.
Are we talking about hundreds or thousands?
Thousands. We're talking about thousands, like thousands of people, and also like people who are everyone had to work from home. And I suppose like the mentality was if we are now a work from home company because we've got no choice, then we can boost development speed by hiring people further afield, people from outside of California, and this whole remote working culture that we've got now. But that all depended on this notion that the new gamers that were coming in as a result of the pandemic would stick around. And now that the lockdowns are over and the pandemic is waned and COVID isn't as serious as it potentially was for people who were vulnerable to it in the early days, those gamers haven't stuck around. They haven't stuck around. So you've got companies like PlayStation, which are the biggest console company in the world, way bigger than Xbox in terms of footprint. Their operating margins, which is like the difference between how much they spend on their company, their sort of expenses versus how much they profit. Their margins during the course of pandemic shrank from like 20% down to 6%. Because they for various reasons, like consumer habits, consumers are nervous about spending money, and people have gone back to work in the office, and they didn't become full-blown gamers. Maybe they just dabbled in a few free-to-play games, and maybe they didn't spend any money on microtransactions or whatever. And then you've got inflation. So the inflationary process, which has gone down, that's increased costs of everything across the board. And if you're a global company, America's inflation has kind of tapered off to some degree. But in the rest of the world, it's not so much the case. Like Britain's still got like a 12% inflation rate. And then you've got countries like Turkey, which have hit like 60%. And you've got countries like Argentina, which are looking at like hundreds of percent.
Oh, yeah.
Off the top of my head. It's and then interest rates have gone up. So like being able to borrow capital is more difficult. So if you do want to spin up a new team or something and do an investment, and like you go to a bank and say, I want X millions of dollars to do this, the interest rates have gone up. So it's sort of like the death of free money, which is what was powering the economy for like the last 20 years almost, with these like historically low interest rates. But that seems to have come to an end as well. So it's a perfect storm of factors that various tech companies and various internet companies, whether it's tech or whether it's gaming, anything online, they had this bet that the pandemic would last forever or something, and that people would just be able to spend money forever on playing games and slacking off at work. But it wasn't real. It was based on just an unreality. And now we've got this situation where the whole gaming business, the whole gaming industry, has actually shrunk when you account for inflation. So like it's grown by like 2% or something, which is well behind America's average economic growth. And it's well behind other entertainment mediums as well, which is another important factor. It's behind movies, books, music. All of those saw growth, but gaming didn't. Gaming didn't see growth because costs increased so much, and because it's mostly an online thing. Companies hired too much, and they were like, okay, we're remote now, we can hire anyone from anywhere in the world, and we'll balloon headcount, and we'll make more Hearthstone expansions than ever, and we'll do more of this than ever, and and it'll just make people spend more money than ever, and it just didn't work out that way. So like they boosted headcount, and while remaining roughly similarly productive in a lot of cases. Or they boosted headcount to maintain the level of productivity that they're already at, and because working from home, is I know there's a big argument in the gaming industry about whether or not remote working should be the norm for gaming, but it does add a drag on the rapidity of everything. If you're uploading builds and working through GitHub and all that kind of stuff, rather than just like doing things locally on a local area network where you've got like full blown internal network speeds and stuff like that, it can put a drag on the process, especially when you factor it in by the size of a game or the size of a team. It's like exponentially multiplicative. I can't say that word. It's exponentially more complicated when you start factoring in these different things. So it's just the reality of it, And also gamers' expectations keep going up. We want more. For less all the time.
Jesus.
Like Microsoft puts out a game and it's like it's not. Every time Microsoft puts out a game and it doesn't have the same graphical fidelity of God of War, like everyone gets mad, and it's like God of War costs like $500 million to make or something.
Jesus.
Reportedly, I just pulled that figure out my ass, by the way, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions. I mean, whatever it is, that's a shit ton.
It's still a lot of money. Like there's reports that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to cost anywhere up to $1 billion to have made.
Oh my God.
It's obscene, and it's like,
shit.
It's like, they'll hopefully make a lot of money, hopefully for their sake rather. But it's like, imagine if that was a flop. Imagine if GTA was a flop, and they spent $1 billion for nothing. Oh. It'd be a disaster. That's when layoffs happen and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a perfect storm of consumer spending on different things. It's a constraints for time, and it's also things like the costs of developing a game have gone up a lot, anywhere up to 20% in some cases, and the death of free capital, and the fact the gaming industry hasn't grown, so investors are less confident in it. It's a huge array of factors, and I don't know when it'll end. There's people saying things like, this could go on for another 2 years. This could go on for another 2 years where like there's still layoffs, and there's still projects being cancelled, and still studios being shuttered because there isn't enough growth in the industry. There's not enough player spending. There's not enough new players. And maybe players like our age are playing less because we've got less time. We're having kids. Well, not me, but normal people are having kids and stuff like that. It's not like yourself.
Us lunatics out here.
And that's really like raising the kids become more expensive than ever. So it's kind of like, what do I do? Do I spend $70 on God of War 3, or do I play Genshin Impact, which is free?
That
and
is
costs
very
me
true.
Nothing.
No, that's very true. You've hit the nail on the head, at least in terms of, like, I guess where my demographic lies, where I might be able to steal a couple hours a few times a week to bang out a game that I want to play. So I am everybody jokes about having, a backlog in their Steam library, but I am so woefully behind in everything I have because I just don't have the time. And it does feel like kind of generationally, right? We came up at a time where we've always played games. We're the first generation really that continued to play games when, it was supposed to be something that you grew out of. It's just the challenge is that you don't have as much time for it anymore. And yeah, you do have to be more judicious when a game is $70 as opposed to $45 or $50. And, it makes a difference. Every dollar makes a difference, especially now. To the points that you made about inflation, politically, you can go back and forth a lot of different ways about why and when and where, but it is a real thing. And it makes a big difference when you're at the grocery store and you're like, damn, that bill's getting big. And, maybe I'm not buying XYZ this week. And so those points ring very true to your average person. So I do think that makes a lot of sense. And so coming out of that, we've seen the hits that Blizzard has taken from either individual games or entire games, or in Warcraft's case seems to be relatively unscathed. There were two big departures that were also part of this that were announced. The first I'll mention is that one of the original co-founders of Blizzard, like Silicon and Synapse, like going back to 1991, Alan Adham, however I say it, I apologize. He has left, and he had left before. He was around until I want to say the early 2000s. He came back a handful of years ago and has been in a senior leadership position. So he departed. But the other, and the one that's getting the most press, is Mike Ibarra, who we've talked about, who you have a long-standing acquaintance with, and he stepped down. He released a statement. I think you'll have to correct me on this. I believe there was something internal, but external on Twitter, I know we saw a pretty big post letting us know. And there seemed to be, generally like, thanks for being here, Mike. That's a shock, but appreciate what you've done. But then to sort of put the bookend on this, it looks like maybe on LinkedIn, he made a statement about how he was going to be taking some time off and traveling the world with his family. And then he was going to, quote, look for hyper growth opportunities with great teams following that. Which, as somebody who's been in a layoff, if one of the people that was in a senior management position left right after that and said the shit that he said, I would be pissed that, oh, you're going to go travel the world while I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to eat.
Yeah, I mean, Mike is notorious for putting his foot in it with his posts on social media.
Yeah,
he really is. Like, I heard that some of the things he said in the past, when he was in Microsoft, led to him being forced to issue a public apology to the whole Xbox team. Like, really proper dressing down. So I will say that Mike is controversial within Microsoft, within Blizzard, and in general. Like, he's a controversial guy for like various reasons, and one of the reasons is like these sort of tone deaf comments that he makes, and he I think he will be first to admit that he does this. And yeah, that was a pretty tone deaf thing for him to say. I didn't know he said that, about traveling the world. Yeah. But when you said it, it was like, yep, that sounds like Michael, right? But yeah. So one of the things about Mike, and one of the annoying things about the corporate world that really bugs me, is when they say people have moved on. They've moved on. I'm moving on to a different opportunity or something. Lulu said it when she got when she left Blizzard, and Mike said it, and Matt Booty said it about Mike Ibarra when he left Blizzard. But I know pretty much for a fact that Lulu and Mike were laid off. They didn't volunteer to retire. Mike, Jason Schreier from Bloomberg said on Twitter that Mike had said to him at BlizzCon that he was in it for the long haul and he was excited about the future and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So it's kind of like not what you say if you're planning to leave.
Right.
So yeah, I don't believe for a second that they weren't part of the layoffs too. And also it goes along with Microsoft's modus operandi for layoffs in general. They often target senior members of staff who've been there for a long time, who cost a lot of money. Like Microsoft laid off a very famous Xbox figure called Major Nelson a little while ago. I don't know if you know or have heard of Major Nelson, but he's been there since the OG Xbox days. He had a website, MajorNelson.com, and he was in charge of Xbox programming and stuff like that. He got laid off when Microsoft did layoffs last year. Also, like some other long-time Microsoft veterans got laid off, like Alex Kipman, who developed HoloLens and the Kinect peripheral, and he was in charge of all their artificial VR stuff and stuff like that. So they often do target senior roles for cost saving, but also like with regards to people like Samwise and Adam, who probably have quite a lot of stock. They probably made a lot of money in the sale.
I'm sure.
They're probably not too upset about having to move on. Not that I'm saying Samwise did, because this Samwise was a little bit earlier, but also like Mike, I'm probably not too upset about having to move on, because I'm pretty sure Mike is probably a multimillionaire, and but that's exactly why this is so tone deaf for him to talk about. Oh, I'm going to travel the world. It's like, bro, you're not just saying that right now.
Yeah.
But
and for folks who don't know, you mentioned Lulu. Who is Lulu?
Lulu Cheng Meservey was in charge of Activision Blizzard comms. So she was famous or controversial on Twitter for she'd been accused of union busting behavior. She was in charge of like Activision's corporate affairs and stuff like that, and she was at BlizzCon in cosplay, I think, as Jaina, I want to say, if I remember correctly. So like she's controversial because she's quite popular with some fans and stuff, but she's controversial within the industry for this union busting accusation and stuff. I don't know what the truth is there or whatever, but these are the kind of the sort of the internal politics that I often hear about with regards to some of this stuff. So with regards to Mike Ibarra, Mike being the Blizzard president, I'm not sure what Microsoft's going to do there. I don't know if like they're just going to not have someone in charge of Blizzard.
That was going to be my next question: is what if there's a vacuum there? How do they fill it?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of did the same with the ZeniMax, because there was Pete Hines from ZeniMax, who was like head of publishing, and he left. But I'm not sure if he left or if he got laid off. It's another one of them.
He moved on.
He's retiring or moving on. You don't know. But it's like, but now like as far as I know, that there is a head of ZeniMax who answers to Matt Booty. So theoretically speaking, Blizzard will have a head figure who then reports into Matt Booty and stuff like that. Because the idea that Matt Booty could manually oversee every single Microsoft gaming studio, you know, of which there are now dozens. Back in the day, there was just Halo, Gears, Forza, and now there's like dozens, Call of Duty, all these other studios. And the idea that he could oversee all that by himself is not viable in my head. So I would think that Blizzard does need some kind of figurehead, sort of leader, you know, and I would hope that it's like, I hope they pick someone who can bring some morale back to that team, you know. Like you mentioned Holly Longdale, and I think that maybe she'd be good for that job, you know.
That's who first came to my mind because of the exact reason that you just said. Is I think back to when Mike Morhaime left, and that was like, oh shit. That was kind of one of those big oh shit moments where things felt really unstable at that moment, because you're like, oh, that's a big one to go. And then you had, I mean, I feel bad for J. Allen Brack. I feel like he got put in a position that was completely unwinnable, and it's
unfair what happened to him, to be honest.
Yeah, I genuinely feel bad for him, and I think he did the best he could with what he had when he was there. And you know, mistakes were made, but man, I truly feel bad for him. And then
he looked devastated. Like you couldn't fake the way.
We saw him with genuine emotion. Like, I think he was always very real. And then he left, right? And that was, you know, I don't know, sacrificial lamb. I don't know how much he was responsible for what happened when all the lawsuits and everything hit. But then we had the co-presidents, right? And then they axed it down, and then it was just Mike. And so there's been problems at the top ever since Mike Morhaime left. It hasn't been stable. And I wonder if Holly might be the best person, because she is, I think, a genuine person when it comes to her passion for Blizzard Gaming, particularly for World of Warcraft. It's not an act. Like, it's legitimate. Like, she feels very deeply and strongly about the work that they're doing, about the people, about the franchises. Like, she's the real deal. And she seems to be the kind of personality that people will rally around. And for what it's worth, right or wrong, I think promoting a woman into that position would be good for them.
Yeah, I honestly think that's probably what they're looking for. Like, when I'm back in the day, before Sarah Bond recently, so I need to explain who Sarah Bond is first. I really take for granted, like, because I, you know, my Xbox audience, but Sarah Bond is in charge of, she was promoted recently. She's in charge of the Xbox ecosystem from a platform perspective. The developers, the hardware, the software. So things like Battle.net probably fall under her responsibility, or her team, right? So before she got promoted into that role, I was often thinking, like, they're going to bring on her to be the CEO of Activision Blizzard. I kind of felt like that was like ideal for her to have done that. You know, the ideal replacement for Bobby Kotick kind of thing, right? But then we've got all this situation where now we sort of like, we don't know where it's all going to go. We don't know if there will be a president. But I think you're right. Like, someone like Holly would be a great get. And Microsoft do like people like that for that role. You know, like Todd Howard, you know, famously the guy who made Skyrim, you know, and Fallout 3, and also recently Starfield. Like, he's basically, you know, his passion is undeniable. You know, like people clown on him about like the quality of some of his recent games, but you can't deny the dude's passion, right?
Yes.
And also, you look at Minecraft, like, still one of the founding developers of Minecraft, still running that studio, Jeb. And they do love people like that for those kind of roles, right? So, yeah, when I think about where they could go with a president, I think you're right. It probably does need to be a woman. And I often think, like, maybe they should try. I don't know what she's doing now. Did she found a studio? Like, when they were doing the co-presidents thing, like what happened. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she ran Vicarious Visions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they got absorbed, and then then she got ousted by Mike. So I think I would have preferred her possibly to have stayed. And maybe that's the play. You get someone who can bring morale back to that team. I kind of feel like when Chris Metzen came back, it was that kind of like, oh wow, it's an OG Blizzard guy coming back. That feels great, because Blizzard is about the culture in a lot of ways. And,
it's Jen O'Neill is who we're talking
Jen
about.
O'Neill, yeah. Jen O'Neill. They could get Jen O'Neill back. I don't know what she's doing now, and maybe she just wouldn't want to. But
oh God, I wouldn't imagine so. But I mean, you never know. I mean, any of us that have ever watched professional wrestling in our life, we have learned to never say never, because you just don't know what's gonna happen out there.
No, you don't.
But yeah, anything's possible, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we're not going to talk about the Vince McMahon drama, right?
That's a whole other episode.
Okay.
Yeah,
but another drama, but it's more like it's less drama and more horror story, that kind of thing.
It's just another reminder that the rich people are off. There's a lot of rich people out there that are insane, and I don't know if it's the money that makes you crazy or the money that just allows you to be your true crazy. But
maybe being crazy is what gets you money in the first place. I don't know.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not crazy enough. Maybe that's maybe I'm half crazy. Maybe that's why.
Too much empathy to be rich.
No, maybe that's it. Care too much. But you know what I won't do is I will not literally take a shit on my employees if I ever have them. So
thank you for that. I'm good. I'm really happy to know that.
Yeah, and I will not try to extort nude photos of you either.
I'm a little less. I'm a little disappointed about that.
Oh well, we'll see what the future holds. Yeah,
never say never in wrestling, right?
Never say never. And that's kind of back to the point is you never quite know what'll happen in these power vacuum situations. And so for us here more locally with Blizzard, in a way, I want somebody like a Holly Longdale. I don't think, I think about like Chris Metzen, but I don't think Metzen wants that wide of a swath. No. I think he likes where he is.
To be creative.
Yeah. I think he wants to stay where he is, because the other thing is I worry about whoever's going to be put in that position, because it's always an impossible spot. I feel like you're never going to make enough money. You're never going to make things quick enough. Nothing is ever going to be good enough. And that steals a person's soul away. And you don't want these bad things to happen to good people, but you never know. Some people are built for it in a way that others aren't. And, whoever it is, certainly they're going to be under the microscope, but they'll also have, I think, the full support, depending on who they are, I suppose, to a degree. But I think they'll have the full support of the community, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is to play good games, to have the people that make them be supported, and to be moving in that same direction together. And so perhaps the silver lining, but I think at least in where my vantage point lies, I've seen so much support for the people that have gotten laid off. Now, I know there's people out there that are shitting on this and that or whatever, but for the most part, it's been a lot of support. It's people reaching out. It's people sharing portfolios. It's people sharing, LinkedIn stuff. It's people sharing other opportunities to network. It's really heartening to me to see the humanity coming together to try to help each other out, because that, above all else, is really what matters. Because you put the games aside, you put Warcraft and canceled games and money and all that stuff aside. I mean, we're talking about people, realized human beings with their own hopes and dreams and their lives that they're living, and you want them to be supported, because one, it's just good to have human beings supporting other human beings, but two, in this industry, people are going to make better stuff if they feel good about what they're doing and where they are, and that to me is the number one. If I see all the money that's being made and I go, you could, if you wanted to, right, make an environment that is inclusive, supportive, gives people what they need and allows them to be free to create, because they're artists and they're different. They are built different than a lot of other people, and you have to put them in positions to be successful. And right now you have a workforce that is scared, that is unsure about what's going on, that is thinking maybe I need to leave this industry, maybe I've got an eye out for the door, and that is a hard way to build a stable team, a productive team, and a good product. And it's just a vicious cycle that I hope that this is the blood that needed to be let, and now we can close that up and get back to good work and supporting people. But maybe it's a good question for you to kind of end this episode on is, do you think that this is it for now for Microsoft? Do you think that the redundancies have been addressed and the major challenges have been sort of cut off, and that now we can begin to rebuild and heal and move on? Or do you think there will be more of this to come?
I mean, I wish I could say that it's probably the end of it, but their headcount is still way higher than it was. So like, I want to believe that there won't be more, but how can you? Yeah. It's really hard to just say that this is it. It's not going to be more than this now. You can't say it, and it sucks that you can't say it.
Yeah.
But I want to believe, man. I really do, but I need to see it. I need to see the evidence of that. Yeah. There won't be more.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to wait and see, I think.
We will. And as always, as I said at the end of last year, this show will be here to address and to discuss the good and the bad, whatever comes up. I had a whole agenda for this show where we were going to talk about reclaiming Gilneas and what happened at the tree and a whole bunch of other good stuff, and we will talk about that in the future. But
we'll talk about that next time.
We will talk about that next time, and we may have to do 2 Trading Post ratings at once. But we felt it was important for this episode just to have an open discussion about the layoffs, the effects that they've had. And Jez, I appreciate you doing a lot of the heavy lifting this episode, and giving us
you do all the heavy lifting, man. it's kind of helps. It's my day job, and it's just kind of like incidental. I had to look at all this stuff at work, and it's horrible, man. I had people. I got a lot of Blizzard friends, Blizzard sources. Mm-hmm. And I had people phoning me up in tears, man. I've never known anything like that. Like, Blizzard's near and dear to my heart, and I had people on social media calling me out for it. They were like, "Oh, you weren't this upset when the Halo had its layoffs and stuff like that." But it's kind of like sometimes, it just sort of it feels so much more visceral and close to home when it's people being affected, and it's like, as much as you try and you want to have empathy for everyone that's going through everything all the time, it's really hard on a global scale to do that. And there as bad as layoffs are, there are things even worse happening in the world when you look at the news, and it's and that's why gaming is supposed to be an escape from all that stuff. There's only so much negativity that any one person can tolerate at any one particular time, and games like World of Warcraft is like a great way of just being like, I'm okay at the moment. I'm playing Warcraft. I don't have to think about any of this stuff. And but when these issues come up and these situations arise, you can't just sort of gloss over it and ignore it, because there are real people at the end of it, like you said. So
that's right. Well, couldn't have said it better. And I think at this point we've probably done enough damage for one episode. So for those who don't already know, where can the good people find you out on the internet, Jez?
You can follow me on Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called now, at JezCorden, JZCorden. And yeah, check out my content on windowscentral.com. I'd appreciate it. Hopefully going to be doing more WoW content, but it's like, how do I compete with Wowhead, man? You just can't. You just can't compete with Wowhead.
The Gothic sprite over there has a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, they're amazing at what they do. So, you know, I'm really glad that they exist. I'm on Wowhead like every single day, pretty much. But yeah, we're Windows Central. We get into the weeds about Microsoft ecosystem, you know, and the whole shebang. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's for Microsoft things. So that's Blizzard, Activision, Xbox, Surface, Windows, whatever. So yeah, thank you very much.
There you go.
And thank you.
Well,
you, sir.
Thank you again for 2 episodes in. We made it 2. You know, we're gonna keep this. We're gonna keep the streak alive. So thanks again for being here, my friend, and my thanks to all of you for listening. And remember, you can always follow me and this show on Twitter at Berserker Rage and Unshackled_Fury, on Blue Sky at Berserker and Unshackled Fury, as well as on Twitch at Unshackled Fury and Real Berserker. You can also join our Discord, links for which are in the profile of the show on Twitter and our bonus roll page. I want to say Jez has done a great job of jazzing that place up, and it's more lively than it's ever been. So please jump on into our Discord. We're having a good time over there. And feel free to contact the show with your questions, comments, or otherwise through any of those resources or unshackledfury.com. And you can find this show wherever you get your podcasts. So once again, thank you for listening. Remember to keep your swords wet and your banners high. And we'll see you next time. Farewell.